need a few supplies. A pretty fat quarter of some quilting weight cotton fabric and a ½ yard of the same weight of fabric for the tie. What you want to start out with is taking the selvages off. You can cut them off. I like to just snip them and rip them. And if it's a good fabric, it'll just slide right off. I'll just cut it right there. And then right there. At this point, it's not a bad idea to go over the edges really quick with an iron. What you want to do now is take your ½ yard piece, which is for your ties and the bottom trim on your apron, and cut it into 3 equal lengths. So we've got an 18-inch ruler here. And I'm going to go to, where's the 6, 6 and 12, right there. And then what I do, you can use scissors, but with fine fabric like this, I just find it's faster and you get straighter lines on the grain if you just tear it on the grain. You might want to test your fabric first before you try that, because not all fabrics do it smooth like that. So just a really quick pressing on these, just get them kind of smoothed out. So these are the tie and trim pieces. Take one of them and then take your fat quarter piece right here. We want the lower edge. This is going to be your trim piece, so you just want to cut it so it's the same width as your fat quarter piece. Just go right. What you want to do is fold it in half so the right side is facing outward. Make sure your raw edges are even and press a good fold so that it's even on both sides. Kind of check the edges. Yeah, so that looks good. With your trim piece folded, you want to flip it so that it lines up on the bottom edge of your main apron piece. So if you look, we've got all raw edges here, there, and there. So the fold is right here. Once that's lined up, go ahead and put a few pins in there to hold it in place. I always like to double check. Double check. Looks good. Now I'm going to sew these together here using about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. We're going to go ahead and sew this in place. After I sewed my pieces together, I went back and did a zigzag stitch along the edge just to kind of finish it off. You can use a serger if you have one. That just keeps it from fraying. And now I'm just going to flip the seam allowance up towards the main fabric and press it. And then I like to flip it over and press it from this side, kind of pushing this up. And then that is ready for me to do a quick top stitch right across here. To do the top stitch, I went ahead and just lined my presser foot up on this edge here, and I'm going to move my width, move my needle over as far as it can go, and just go right along that edge. Yep, I like it. Now I'm going to work on the tie. Take the smaller piece, just set it right there, grab one of the longer ones, pin it together on one end. There's one. And then take the other one and pin it on this end. Make sure your right sides are together. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to sew these together and these together using about a 3/8 inch seam allowance again. So I'm just going to run over to my machine, boop, boop, and then I'll be back. Finished sewing these together, so now I am just going to open my seams up and press them. Now we're just gonna hem the sides. And just a really narrow hem. So there's a couple ways to do this. Just make like a 1/4 inch fold. I'll show you one way and then I'll show you the other way on the other side. You can decide which one you like best. And then let it cool a little bit. Just another one. Just nice and narrow. Now this side, I'll show you another way that I like to do hems. I'm just gonna spray it ahead of time. So I'll just do it, fold it up to about a 1/2 inch like that. This takes practice, but I like it because it just gives me nice straight results. So I get it like that, let it cool, and then I'll just tuck that in. And I just kind of work with it while the iron is holding it down. Go a little further down. Tuck that in. Go down here. Just do a little at a time. Down to here and like that. Then I'm just gonna sew these down and we'll be ready to put it all together. All right, so the sides are sewn, they're hemmed, they look good. Now it's time to put the whole thing together. I've made some changes to these instructions since I first did this tutorial in 2008. Now that I use glue for a lot of my sewing, you'll see why it makes more sense to do it this new way. I'm gonna pin them in place. Here's the seams right there. So I'm gonna put it right in between. I'm gonna pin across here. And then I'm going to sew from here to here using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. One thing to keep in mind when you're using a small seam allowance like that, you really want to be careful that your edges meet up. You don't want them apart like this. Check the other side. You don't want them to come apart like this. You want to be checking the whole time. So what I do is I grab it, check both sides, put it together. Yep, lined up. Do the same thing here. Make sure your ends are together, your edges right there. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna sew across here, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've got my main apron in place, and what I'm gonna do is flip that up like that, and then press my seam allowance up so it will be enclosed in the tie area. I really want this to flatten out, so I'm gonna spritz it. And I kind of pull the fabrics apart when I'm doing this to make sure it's not curling in on itself. Now what I'm going to do is right here, follow it up to the top, and I'm gonna fold this down 1/4 of an inch. Just from here to here. All right, so now it is time to create our ties. And what you do is fold this back. I put a pin right there. Okay. So I put that there and just pin the whole thing like the other side. On both of these ends, at 2 inches from the end, you're gonna put a mark. So let's go 2 inches. We're gonna go about a 1/4 inch down right there. Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna sew along here, you're gonna stop here and pivot, and then basically sew down to here so that you have pointed ends on your ties. All right, I have got my needle, I've got it moved over so it gives me about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I put the needle down just on this side of my main apron fabric. So it's in the tie area, but it's not going through the apron fabric. And here we go. All right, gonna go all the way down to that purple mark. So here's the purple mark. I'm almost there. I'm gonna go a little further. All right, needle down, lift up my presser foot and pivot it till I'm pointing straight to just past the end, like right about here. So lower that down and do a straight shot right to there. Now that the ties are sewn, I'm going to use a turning tool. You could reach in and kind of scooch it out a little at a time. That's doable. But a turning tool will make it so much quicker and more fun. So you take the tube on your turning tool and just go all the way to the very end. So the point is right there at the end of the turning tool. And I still want to be able to hold the other end of the turning tool. There. Okay. Now take the stick part of the turning tool and poke it into the tube. So I'm going to push it enough to where it comes out the end of the tube. So I'm just going to grab that, take the stick out, pull it down enough to take this out, and now I'm just ready to turn the whole thing right side out, just like that. Then what I want to do is take this pointy part of the stick, go all the way back up to that corner again, and just gently push it out so that it's nice and pointed like that. Okay. And I'll do that on the other side. Before I sew the last part closed, I want to press the ties really well, and I like to press this seam open first and then kind of get it lined up. I just like to press that seam this way. Like that. Then get that out, get it nice and pointed, and then turn it so that the seam is on the side and go this way. Now I'm going to do the other tie. Now it's time to do the last stitch, and that's just sewing the whole thing shut, and then we'll be finished. What I like to do so that I get a nice straight stitch, which I can do it on the front now because the glue makes it so accurate that the stitches that show look really good. What I'm going to do is right here, this folded area, I'm just going to do half at a time. I'm going to put glue along here. Fold it in place so it covers, just covers that stitch. So no one will see the stitch underneath there. And then heat set it in place with your iron and then do the last part. I just do a little at a time because the glue dries very quickly, and if the glue dries before you can heat set it, it won't stick. You want to iron it while the glue is still wet. So do the rest of that from here down to the end. Flip it into place, make sure it is covering so no stitches are showing. All right, that's not going anywhere, and now I'm ready to do the last stitch. I'm gonna do an edge stitch, so I just want it to be just above this fold right here, right along here. Okay, I've rolled up the bottom part of my apron to get it out of the way so that it can fit under the throat easily. And this line here where these fabrics meet is under the center point of my presser foot. I've moved my needle over a couple bumps to the left side so it's right on the edge of this. It'll be nice and clean. That's all done. That looks really pretty. Now what I want to do is clean all the little threads up. Then I'm gonna give it a nice ironing. And it's done.